Hello, everyone, and welcome to the kickoff call for the 2021 season of Global CPTC. Can you believe this is already the seventh year that we're doing this? I know time flies, and it's hard to believe that we're already at this point, but we're looking forward to everyone competing this year. In this presentation, we're going to walk through everything you need to know to be ready to compete for the regional events that are happening in October and November. So for our agenda today, it's just a couple topics we're going to touch on, and these are the goals that we have. First, we're going to talk about the rules and the COVID-19 changes and challenges that we're facing this year, and it's a continuation of what happened last year, but it's going to be just we want to make sure everyone's on the same page and ready to compete. We'll talk about the schedule and the deadlines, when you're going to be competing and when your deliverables are going to be due. We'll talk about logistics and connectivity to the environment. We'll talk about how you interact with us during the event, how to communicate and the in and out of character interactions, and then we'll talk about deliverables and reporting and make sure that you know what you want to turn into us in order to get scored and do well in the event. We're pre-recording this event so that this meeting can be used for all of the regional events and everyone gets the same information. So let's talk a little bit about the voices behind the screen. So I'm going to go right to left, I guess, here. So I'm Tom Kopchak. I am part of the business and monitoring team captains here at CPTC and have worked with Lucas and Justin as competition co-directors since CPTC started.
And my name is Lucas Morris. I have also been working with Tom, Justin, and Bill Stackpool, several others here for all 7 years of CPTC, both leading a lot of the infrastructure team as well as a co-director for the rest. By day, I am also a senior manager at Security Risk Advisors doing penetration testing. So let's start to step in to what we're going to see for this year. Now, there's a few things, given we're doing this fully remote, again, similar to last year as part of the pandemic. But there's one thing that we really want to talk about first, and that is what is our goal? And our goal here is education. Now, as we've worked through this competition for several years, for those of you that have done this before or have been a part of this, you may know Bill Stackpool. And when Bill set out to create this competition, as he's the OG on this and the original person with the idea for all of it, the idea was that we teach a lot of folks around how to run tools, how to do different technical techniques, how to run systems and servers. But one place that people have a hard time getting real experience before they enter the real world and graduate is in interacting with clients and the interpersonal part of security. Now, whether you're like Tom or myself and have been spending years working as a consultant or a leader in an organization helping folks and helping customers to improve their security, or if you're destined to become a security researcher or a in-house security analyst, you're going to need to be able to communicate. And CPTC gives you that opportunity not just to try a little bit different take on security by performing a consulting engagement, but also gives you an opportunity to try all of the soft parts about that, from risk to communications, while still having a pretty awesome and pretty cool technical place to do all of those things. So with that, there's a few key things that we want to talk about for 2021 and the rules and some clarifications given the pandemic. So first, as we've mentioned already, all of this is going to be remote. We are hoping that finals may be in person or some sort of hybrid, but we're not close enough to that to be able to make a decision there. But all of the regionals are going to be remote. Now, remember, you are a consulting firm. You are a group of folks that are working with a client and through that need to be professional. So within the rules, you'll find several places where unprofessional behavior is noted. And what that is something that's up to the discretion of the judges. So if you have any questions about what is or isn't, please let us know. We're happy to discuss examples from our real world experience and prior competitions on what we can and can't do. Tools in general are also very specific here in what we allow and do not allow. So we're looking for things that are freely available and permitted for use. So if you have to create an account to sign up for something, or if it requires a license, even if a license has been given to your university for free, we cannot use it here. And that's ultimately for one reason, and that is to create a fair environment for everyone that is participating in CPTC. So if you have questions about a specific tool, submit a ticket, send us an email. We can look through it, have a conversation with you. Finally, OSINT is live. So for those of you that haven't seen or checked your emails or follow us on Twitter, all of that information is out. More things may or may not be coming. You never know what a client may do with some of their public internet presence. But as you're working through this, please remember that only competitors, only those folks on your team should participate in working through all of that OSINT. In the past, we've had teams have other folks, coaches and others get excited and get involved in this process, and that's perfectly fine. People could do that on their own. But your team should not receive information from them. You should be doing this by yourself as part of the ongoing competition. So if you have any other questions, you can find the full set of rules on the link here. All of that's available. And as we've mentioned before, please reach out to us. You'll find contact information and methods of communication later in this presentation.
So next, let's talk a little bit about the schedule and deadlines for the event and how this is all going to work this year. So first I want to talk about the general schedule, then we'll talk about more specific timelines and time zone information for each event, and then the specific breakdown of how each competition day is going to work. But the general schedule is prior to the event, about a week before, we will be sharing some information with you about a test system that you can use to practice accessing the environment. Now, this virtual system is going to be very similar to what you're going to experience in the event, but it's not going to carry over into the final competition environment. So if you do any customizations, make any changes, you're wasting your time because that system is just not going to exist for the actual event. But it will allow you to ensure that from your location, you're able to access the systems. So we encourage you to do this testing from where you plan to compete. On the actual day of the competition, which we'll call Saturday, it's going to begin in the morning and end in the evening. So you wake up, you compete, you have access to the systems, you do your assessment, you capture your data, and then in the evening, you no longer have access to the environment, and you transition into the reporting phase of the assessment. And then from there, early Sunday morning, the reports are going to be due, and then later in the evening, we will announce the winners. That's the general breakdown of how these events are going to flow. Now I want to look at the three specific groups of geographical areas where we're going to actually have events and look at the specific time zones where you will be competing. So there are two main weekends that this is occurring, October and November. In October, we have two separate time zones or geographical areas, and for November, we only have one. So for the first October set of time zones are going to be those that are going to affect Middle East and Europe teams. The way I have this broken down is by Gulf Standard Time and Central European Standard Time, and also for reference have US Eastern Daylight Time where RAT is located, and then UTC for anyone who wants to do that conversion. We'll go through this just in one of the time zones for each of these to make sure everyone's on the same page. And then there will be adjustments for time zones that are a little bit different. So here for Gulf Standard Time, which is the time zone that Dubai is located in, we'll start at 8 a.m., where your assessment will begin. At 6:30 p.m., the assessment phase will end, and you will no longer have access to the environment. At 1 a.m., the reports are due, and at 7 p.m., the awards ceremony will happen. And those times for Central European Standard Time are just 2 hours different for everything. Let's move on to the United States and America region. So there are two time zones that are going to be in play here. That'll be Central Daylight Time and Eastern Daylight Time for the New England, Southeast, and Central regions. For Central Time, we'll start at 8 a.m. We'll end at 6:30 p.m. Reports will be due at 1 a.m. and awards will happen at 6 p.m. Those times are just an hour later for Eastern time, happening at the same time, just different time zones. Okay, moving on to the November regionals, we will have 3 teams that are going to be competing in the North American region, our friends in Canada, and the Northeastern and Western events. There's 2 main time zones that are in play here, Pacific Standard Time and Eastern Standard Time. For the Pacific Time, we'll start at 7 o'clock a.m. and wrap up the assessment at 5:30 p.m. The reports will be due at 12 a.m. or midnight, and the awards will happen at 5 p.m. on Sunday. For Eastern Time, it'll just be a 3-hour difference because of how the time zone works, starting at 10 a.m., wrapping up at 8:30 p.m., reports due at 3 a.m., and awards Sunday at 8 p.m. Now that we've talked about the breakdowns for the individual regions, let's talk a little bit more about the detailed schedule and how these time zones are going to actually translate to what you're doing during the event. So for the sake of this example, we're going to say this is a region that started at 7 or at 8 a.m., but if you were an event that started at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or 10 a.m., you have to adjust these times according to what was on the previous few slides. So what I would encourage you to do, pause the video on those slides, take a screenshot of what your time zone is, and make sure you know when your event is starting and ending and when your reports are due. But just translating that into what an event is going to look like, this is the breakdown. At 8 a.m., we're going to have a meeting where we'll have the kickoff and opening discussion with the client. At 8:20, the credentials and access information is going to be available in the team portal that Lucas will talk about in a little bit. At 8:30 a.m., you will have access to the environment and be able to log in and begin your assessment. At 6:30 p.m., your access to the environment will end and the reporting phase will begin. We will have a quick Q&A and end-of-day briefing 5 minutes later at 6:35 p.m. At 1 a.m., your reports will be due via the Google Drive Dropbox, and Sunday evening will be the awards presentation. So now I'll turn it over to Lucas to talk a little bit about logistics and connectivity and how you actually access the environment.
Thank you, Tom. So there's going to be a few things that everyone is going to be provided as we move into the competition over the coming weeks. Now, for those of you that have done this in the past, this is going to be very, very similar to the way we've done everything else. And first and foremost, everyone will be provided with a Google account that has access to both a team drive and an email inbox. Now, there's a couple of key things that are very important around both of these. First, the team email will be the primary way in which the client is going to be communicating with you during the engagement and during the event. So make sure that you have someone from your team keeping an eye on that, because communications will come through there. Furthermore, the shared drive is where you should put all of the information that you have and that you keep. You need to protect this just like you would anything else you would in a client relationship. That is the client's environment, so you can put anything you want in there, but the things you take out are going to be what we review and what the client will be looking to make sure you protect and redact. Additionally, you will submit your reports through a Dropbox in that account. Everyone's also going to be given a virtual desktop infrastructure. Now, each member of your team will be given a Windows and a Unix machine that you'll be able to use throughout the competition. So there will be 12 total systems for all of your team members. Access to the client's environment will be through that VDI infrastructure via remote desktop to the RIT Cyber Range where we're hosting the competition this year. All of your work needs to be performed within the VDI systems. There is no reason for you to be pulling anything out of it. We get people asking us every year if things like a GPU will help. It won't. The passwords and other things are designed so that it's either not going to matter or you're never going to get it during the time frame of the competition. So because of that, you don't need to be pulling systems out. Everything you need to do will be in that VDI environment. Now, what's important to note as we look through all of this is all environment access is monitored. Your VDIs, your Google Drive, even access to some of our management and scoring systems. So any anomalous access during the event will result in a contact for our team. But we will also, for every team that is advancing to finals, be doing a more detailed audit of all of your performance during that time. So anything that we identify that may be a potential issue, we'll make note of. And we've had this happen every year where there's a couple of teams that take everything from the Google Drive or do large wholesale removal of information from the client environment, or later we find some idiosyncrasies with some of the things that they were doing during the regionals. And we'll reach out and discuss all of that, because in some cases it was valid, and in some cases there was an opportunity for changing how we thought about information at the client. So if you do something, accidents happen, let us know, report it, reach out, and our response will be very different than if we find something. Finally, just to ensure fairness across all of the different competitions, we have 2 weekends of regionals this year. We're asking everyone not to post any detailed or technical information around or about the environment until after the finals competition in January. We know you all have done a lot of really cool things to prepare for this. We really want to encourage you to post all of that. But what we don't want to happen is for, let's say, a team that competes in October during the regional to post something and thus make it easier for the teams that are competing in November. That would create an unfair environment, and as such, we're just asking you to hold off. In fact, we highly encourage you to post as much as you would like and any information that you've got after that January timeframe. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let us know. The NDA that we'll be sending to you as well also includes a little bit of information around that. So as far as access during COVID, there's a few other points that are important. As we've mentioned a few times, all of the regional events are going to be held remotely. Additionally, we're going to be using Discord this year for all communication during the event. So you'll have your own room, you'll have your own access where only members of the client will be able to jump in to come talk to you during those phases. That Discord, though, is open. We've got some contact information here very shortly around that. Please feel free to join it at any time. Competitors, as I've mentioned before, each of you are going to be getting an individual VDI system. The ask here is that you do not switch systems once one of you have logged into it. If you need to do that, please submit a ticket and let us know. But we are tracking IP addresses and connection information to each of those to try and ensure competition integrity while we're all remote. Finally, during the period in Saturday evening when you're working on your reports, you can access the Google Drive from personal machines. We know you need to work on the report, but be careful about what you pull down, because the client's information is protected in the drive and your personal machines are not. So you should only be pulling down non-sensitive information. So we've mentioned a few different things throughout this. There's 2 great ways to get help as you go through this. So the first is support.cp.tc. This is our support desk where you can submit tickets during the competition as well as before. You'll be able to submit and ask for help here. This is probably the best place to do it, although you can always email support@cp.tc. We're trying to keep a better eye on the support tickets throughout the weeks coming up to the competition to try and answer questions if we have them or if we can. Second, I also mentioned Discord. So there's a few important things around this. First, you already have access to the team management system. If you don't, your coach and your captain already do. If you don't, please email us and we'll do our best to get that access resolved. But you need to fill out all of your team information. And we've included this year in this a Discord identifier. During the competition right before, we are going to set up everyone's access using some bots and some tools and scripts that we've put together. And that access will be how you get into your various Discord rooms for your regions and competitions. So because of that, please make sure your Discord IDs are there and that they are correct. Now you can join this now. We encourage you to do so. There's always some conversation, that's happening there throughout. And there's always lots of things going on in the general channel, so you can always reach us there. One last thing we do also want to mention about this is because the size of the competition has grown, we're changing a little bit into how scoring is going to be done for the at-large winners. In the past, we asked all of our grading volunteers to grade every single report across every region. The problem is that as the competition have grown, that's become more and more onerous on a lot of our volunteers, and it's become difficult for us to complete each weekend as we move through the various regions. So this year we've divided the group into two different grading teams that you'll see as we work through things. Each region has their own team. Now, most of that is very similar volunteers, but given the time zone and differences, some of those people may be different. Those will be the ones that score your reports for the overall winning of each region. We then have a separate group that actually includes some, but not all, of the various volunteers and some new ones that will be doing at-large grading in late November after the second set of regionals has been completed. This group of grades are the ones that will be used to select the 7 teams who will be the at-large winners that advance to the finals. So the important thing to note here is in the past, if you were second place in a region, the odds are that you were probably going to get an at-large advancement. And while that's still most likely going to be the case because the graders all have professional experience and thus tend to have similar, although differing, feedback for everybody, there may be some situations where that's not directly the case. Now, in our scoring system this year, you'll be able to get direct access to the feedback and be able to see a little bit more information, including your scores. So if you have questions after the fact, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to try and talk through that. But did want to let people know about the change in the way we're organizing volunteers as the competition has grown.
So thank you, Lucas. Next, let's talk a little bit about the role-playing and in-character interaction, and really the special sauce that makes CPTC what it is. So our client this year, and Lucas will talk a little bit more about that in the next section, but is Bon Bon Croissant, and the people that you're going to be working with, the CPTC volunteers, are actually, within the context of the event, LBC employees. So they're not a CPTC volunteer when they're talking to you during the event. They're your customer. You want to treat them like you would a client. When they come to you and they need something or have a question, that's your customer asking you a question. During the regional events, if they need to get in touch with you, that may happen via email, it may happen via tickets, there might be phone calls, as well as some other in-character interaction via other mechanisms such as Discord. So when you're working with the client during this event, that's what you're doing. You're not competing. If you talk about a competition, the customer is going to be really confused because it's not a competition for them. They hired you to do the work. So keep that in mind when you're doing the assessment. We think of this as a competition. You're competing. We call it a competition. But the actual event when it's occurring, you're not competing. You're professionally working with a customer. One thing to keep in mind, there are times during the event that us, as professionals and competition organizers, we might explicitly step out of character to provide feedback, advice, or just professional experience that we can share with you to make you better, or provide in the moment advice or feedback based on something that happened during an interaction. Our goal here is to give you the opportunity to learn from what happened and also gain some experience. We don't want to try to make you feel bad, tell you, there's something that you did wrong. It's all designed to be constructive criticism or advice based on our experience. When this happens, we will tell you, and you'll know that this is happening. We'll say, out of character, this is what we're going to say. And our goal there is just to give you the opportunity to learn and be better equipped to have more experience working with the customer in the future. So that's one of the things that makes this unique and something that we strive to do as part of this event. And it's one of the things that really makes CPTC special. One of the other things that makes CPTC special is the client that we build each year. And Lucas, I'll let you talk more about Le Bon Bon Croissant.
Thanks, Tom. So this year we are Le Bon Bon Croissant, which is a manufacturer and retailer of fine candies and croissant in France. The company has spent a lot of time working on various improvements to their organization. And we have a test warehouse that we've used over the years to demo and prove out newer automation technologies. Now, recently, we've come under an immense amount of pressure from an upstart company that's looking to take over a fair amount of our market, Les Bon Bon Muffin. And part of that has then been resulting in us spending more time focusing on improving the products and competing in the market with that competitor. Now, we recently also suffered a cyber attack. We can talk a little bit more about that once we're under a non-disclosure agreement. But one of the things that our insurance has required through this is for us to get a penetration test, among a few other things that we're doing, to help ensure that our partners and customers are protected as best as we can throughout all of our future activities. So we have a security team. We've had one for years, and they've been on high alert and are now eager to validate the implementation of various controls that we've put in place. Now, similar to the way we've done technology implementations in the past, we have actually developed and focused on the security of this warehouse first, knowing that we may broaden our scope from that as we move into future years of our organization. So while we do love croissants, we love security more and are really looking forward to having your opinions on everything that we're doing through this. Now, as part of that, we do need to protect our data, our intellectual property, and all of the critical information that we have around our customers and their payment information. So we will be sending a non-disclosure agreement to you, to all of your partners and managers as we move into the competition. Now, all of the consultants on your teams must complete and return all of those onboarding documents to make sure that we have everything protected. So as we've mentioned several times throughout this presentation, we do expect you to protect our data as you would any other professional organization or your own data personally. There's a lot of important pieces in this for us, and we look at our customers and our fiscal and professional responsibilities to protect them as a key part of this. Now, stepping out of character for a moment and moving back to the regular presentation, we will be using the term partner for all of your coaches, as we assume that we're talking to them about owners of the company, and your managers, your captains will be managers, with the consultants being everyone else on your team. So obviously, this non-disclosure agreement is not a legally binding document. You'll even note that it says that inside of it. But we do use this just to kind of get in character and get in the mode, but also to provide you with some reminders around the rules on all of it. So any breach of this is not going to result in anything legally binding, but we do reserve the right to penalize scores for things that happen in it. So the document is important.
Okay, let's shift over and talk a little bit about deliverables and what you're going to be giving to us in order for us to assess your performance and decide what teams are best to move on to the finals. So a couple requirements. This is going to be a continuation of the requirements we've had for the past several years, but we're going to continue that all deliverables must be branded as the clients, in this case LBC. When you identify yourself in a team, you only should be doing it by team number and region. For example, Western 1 for team number 1 in the Western region. We don't want you to have any mention of their firm or institution name, or anything such as a mailing address or details that might allow someone reading the report to link that back to your institution. We do this for fairness. We don't want our graders to have any assumptions that are made when they're looking at a report as to what team did it. And by doing this and making the reports as blind as possible, we want them to be assessed based on the merit of the content as opposed to any assumptions someone might have based on the school that created the report. Second, we have and are continuing to distribute those reports across the internet on GitHub so that anyone is able to look at what teams have submitted in the past. We have the 2019 and 2020 example reports from all of the teams that competed in the finals made available in a redacted form. And all the teams that are competing, we encourage you to take a look at these, download the reports, take a look at different teams' approaches and how they produce their report. And that'll give you a lot of great ideas about what you might want to do for your report this year in order to place well in the regional events. So take a look at those resources, and we want to continue to make that available so that all teams can keep on getting better. And with that, that takes us to the final kind of wrap up part of this presentation where we talk about some of the things that we've learned running this over the past 7 years. And like I said, Lucas, it's hard to believe it's been 7 years and how change. But I'll let you run with kind of some expectations in the environment.
Yeah, and you know, I'm sure you're going to have some good thoughts on this as well. But when you get into this environment, you're going to see a few things. So the volunteers that build all of these systems out have varying years of experience. Some of us 15, 20, even more years working for various clients or inside an individual organization, all the way down to some recent competitors from folks that have just graduated in the last couple of years. And so we aim to create as realistic of an environment as possible, but there's a couple of key differences. So first, sadly, we don't have the computing resources to create thousands of workstations, and frankly, you all don't have the time to go through them. But instead, what we do is create something representative, especially on the server systems side. So there will be multiple attack paths. There is a realistic retail warehouse environment that has been created. You're going to see a lot of different applications that you may not have ever seen in your careers thus far. So there are potentially hundreds of application issues, configuration issues. And the truth is, you're not going to find everything. Every year when we run statistics on the various grades from a technical perspective that the teams have run, we find that there's certainly some overlap on some very clear low-hanging fruit. But after that, everyone tends to find different things. More importantly, we don't know about everything. And every year, all of you all come up with new things that we didn't even know were in there, which I think is absolutely exciting every year to see. So as you're doing this, focus on identifying the issues that are significant and have the most business impact to the organization. We've given you a lot of good information today. There's a lot of good information in the RFP that we can use to chat through and talk through, and you can use to prepare. But targets aren't always going to be clearly marked. You will know very specifically from the client what your scope is, and stay inside that. If you have any questions with them around the scope and any changes that you may want to make, you need to have that conversation with them. But overall, this is going to run like a real pen test where you see things, things don't make sense, and you find other things. But as you're moving through it, focus on the business's risk. That's frankly the best recommendation that I can give to all of you.
So last but not least, I want to encourage you all to think. Think like a professional and understand that you are a consultant doing a pen test engagement at an actual customer. The customer has a business. They have a product and service that they're providing to their customers. And if you take something down, you're responsible for that. And we will also know what you're doing in the environment to be able to have the evidence to say that you took something down when you in fact take something down. It happens every year where something breaks and teams are like, nope, it wasn't us. And there's no one else in the environment. And we have the logs and evidence to show what you're doing. So understand what you're doing, understand what your tools do, and take responsibility for what's happening. Understand that LBC is a manufacturer. They are producing products, they're shipping products to their customers. They have a warehouse that's operating. If you impact the operations of that environment, you could lead to loss of profits and loss of business operations for LBC. I want you to consider the scope as you're performing your task? What did the customer ask you to assess? And are the systems that you're asked to look at part of that scope? Understand network addressing and understand network names and how those two relate. And understand what your tools are doing and how they interact with systems. When you run a tool against a name, what is that actually doing? When you run a tool against a subnet or an IP address, what kind of traffic is being sent there? Think about what those tools do. Also, consider the client's environment and the potential issues that could result with interactions with those environments. PLCs and distribution systems, those aren't the most reliable systems that exist, and they can respond differently depending on what traffic is sent to them. So if you're planning on performing an assessment against those types of systems, understand what your tool is doing and how it can impact that type of system. Finally, communicate. One of the biggest things Lucas and I have to do professionally is talk to clients and understand what the client's needs are and how to make sure that they understand what we are doing and what we want to do. Communication is more of our job than any of the technical work that we do. And we want you to understand that and carry that in with you as you compete in CPTC. It's much better to ask for permission, get that permission, cause an issue, and have the client have to deal with the responsibility and ramifications of that, as opposed to breaking something and then having an angry client yelling at you for a problem that you caused or could have prevented. So keep that in mind. We look at this from the perspective of having years of experience, being in the shoes that you will have as the competition, and being on the receiving end of many awkward conversations that we have looked to try to prevent based on just trying to fix those problems from happening in the future. So keep that in mind. This is our one experience as professionals to be the customer, and we get to experience or get to channel basically hundreds or thousands of clients that we work with over the years and share that experience with you based on what you get to do in this event. So Lucas, anything else you'd like to add?
No, Tom. I mean, I think being proactive, working with the client, being open and honest are some of the most important things I wish I'd done. For me, having been doing consulting, certainly I spend a lot of time talking with folks, but even people that are in-house analysts, friends that are security researchers, and all the other folks in between in security. And when we talk with them, whether they're volunteers here or just people we know, everyone always says that communication is the one thing they wish they had more time to practice, because they all do it, whether it's via email or in person or via phone. So take this opportunity to use that and get good feedback on that, because no matter what you're doing in security, it'll probably be one of the single most important things that affects your career long term.
Absolutely. And that's why we make this event happen. So that wraps up this session, and we are looking forward to virtually seeing all of you at the regional events in October and November, and then hopefully seeing a bunch of you that make it on to the international finals in January. Our contact information is listed here. We'll note that the Twitter handle at GlobalCPTC is the official one that will be sending information out, so we encourage you to follow that one. The national CPTC one that we've used in the past is not one that we're actively sending out content with in most cases. And our domain, cp.tc, the coolest, shortest domain ever that we got, we'll be using that as part of our communications as well. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to this and absorbing all the information. And we are totally looking forward to making this an awesome 7th year. Thank you very much, and see you very soon.